Hi, my name is Niamh. I'm an artist and art educator living in Kildare in Ireland. I graduated from college in 2001 and I've been teaching art and making art since then. My background has definitely fed into my art. It's had a big impact on my art. I had a very happy childhood. We had lovely summer holidays. We had very warm, loving parents. We had an amazing extended family. There was always gangs of us going around the place together and just very fond memories of that time. One of my favorite books growing up was The Little Mermaid, so I've never moved away from that. It's been a long time since I was a child, but I think the childlike sense of wonder, it's still there. I just see the world maybe a little differently. I'm a very optimistic person. My work is optimistic as well. I think recently the light beams and the ships, it's about optimism and hope, a light in the darkness perhaps. And my parents were always readers and they always encouraged us to read. um I'm back now looking at children's picture books. I have a huge collection of children's picture books, and growing up it was Roald Dahl with Quentin Blake, obviously, and Quentin Blake's illustrations really told the story. I remember the words in the stories, but I remember the pictures more. I remember I can see the faces of the characters. I can see the illustrations, and it's always been very visual for me. One of my other favorite books as a child was The Little Mermaid, and I still have the book. I still have the book that I would have had when I was a child, and I'm still drawing mermaids. I'm still drawn to the water. I wanted to be a mermaid myself. I also wanted to be a ballerina, and enjoyed both of those activities as a child. I also worked as a swimming teacher and a coach for a long number of years. Very heavily involved with swimming and life saving, as a teacher and a coach and as a competitor. This definitely comes through in my work. I can't seem to let go of the water. I don't work as a swim coach anymore, but I have a young son who I bring swimming, and he also adores the water. It's a lovely thing to do together. Um, but the water theme, absolutely, I can't seem to stay away from it. I find inspiration in everyday things. I find inspiration all around me. In terms of my influences, I suppose growing up, I would have obsessed with David Hockney, Andy Warhol, with different films, The Wizard of Oz, Mary Poppins, other artists then like Marc Chagall. I've always adored children's books. I remember children's books growing up, and Quentin Blake, Eric Carle, those visuals and the stories that were read to me and the stories that I later read myself, they've always inspired me. I've never forgot about them. They're part of who I am. I love film. I find Wes Anderson extremely inspiring as a director. I watched Wes Anderson before he got trendy. Now he's very on trend, and I can see why. His cinematography is so beautiful. His graphic props, his the whole scene he sets. He's such an amazing storyteller. I want to try to do that in my work as well, to tell a story. And The Little Mermaid was one of my favorite books as a child. I'm still drawing mermaids. I've always drawn mermaids, so I think that's definitely been a big influence on me and my own creative practice and what I want to draw. At the moment, I'm focusing on a few things. One of the first things I'm focusing on is a book. I'm focusing on illustrating for a children's book. I always had an idea that I wanted to do a children's book. I just didn't know how to go about doing it. In 2010, I went back to college and I did graphic design and I did illustration for children's books to give me the knowledge and the tools to try to put this together. For a number of years, I let this slide, and more recently, I have a young son who's fascinated with children's books, and that set me back down on the path of looking again at the children's books. In April of this year, I met a very talented writer and photographer from Northern Ireland who agreed to write the text for me for the book. So I could see the pictures, I could see the visuals, I could nearly see what the main character was going to look like, but I couldn't put the words together for the story. So it's a very exciting collaborative project that's ongoing, and I'm hoping to go to Bologna to the Children's Book Fair in April of next year to bring it over a dummy book and to sit down and meet with publishers. So that's something I'm working on at the moment. I'm also working towards an art exhibition in June of 2024 with a very good friend and a very talented painter, Rachel Burke. So together we put in a proposal to the Irish Georgian Society. I saw this space. I couldn't believe the beauty of the space and the possibility of maybe having a show there. I haven't really exhibited properly since my last solo show was in 2010. So it's been a long time, and our proposal was accepted. We couldn't believe it. We said we'd put in the proposal and see what happens without any expectations. So the building itself is incredibly beautiful, and I think it's going to inspire lots of work. The stories of the place, the architecture, the location, the history. It's just a very inspiring building, and there's a beautiful space inside it, an octagonal space where we're going to exhibit our work. So at the moment I'm working on pieces for that show. The biggest challenge of being an artist, I think, is to keep up that creative momentum and to keep the work going. When you're teaching, it can be exhausting and draining, but also extremely rewarding. I suppose it's hard to maintain that level of giving to other people and to maintain your own visual art practice as well. Time management, that's a big thing. I generally work in the evening. I get maybe a couple of hours, and the odd weekend I'll get a chance to sit down and do my work. So that's quite a challenge to fit it in, really, with everything else you have going on in your life. But it's something that has to be done. I know it's something I need. I'm very happy being back at my art now at the moment, and I'm constantly being inspired. One of my favorite quotes growing up, I remember I used to have it scrawled on the inside of my wardrobe at home, was face your fears, live your dreams. And I think I would advise my younger self now to do that. Just face your fears and live your dreams. If you can make your dreams and make your passions into a career, if you can support yourself that way, just go for it. Don't let anyone hold you back. And in terms of your art, if there's gaps and if there's times in your life when your art is gone or it doesn't seem to be there anymore, don't worry, it'll come back. Just give it time, and it'll always be there for you. You will go back to it. I was never one to settle on one particular media. That would be too straightforward. When I was in college, I was the student who used to go between the etching press and the screen printing. I'd be back down to my studio. I'd have my paint out. I'd be back up to the print room. I used to get in trouble for getting etching ink on the screen print area and for getting ink on the beds of the press and on the blankets on the printing press. I think it's just maybe part of my personality. I go from one thing to the next, and I think that very much so in my art. At the moment, I do still mix my media. I haven't quite settled on one. I love what happens when you mix media together and the results are unexpected. I love that surprise. When I was in college and I was working primarily in print, the moment you lifted the paper off the plate, that was always the best surprise. I think that's what I like now. I like when something unexpected happens, or when you try something on one media on top of another media and you see how they interact. At the moment I'm working with ink, I work with dip pen, I work with brush, I work with markers, I work with pencil, colored pencil, acrylic. I use lots of different media. I use primarily work on paper. I think it suits the media I use, usually kind of a heavier weight paper. I don't know if I'll ever be able to settle on one media. I think that's going to be the way I work, with lots of different media. Um, yeah. I generally do like to have music on when I'm working. My taste in music is quite eclectic. My playlist is completely random, with everything from Joni Mitchell, Billy Joel, film soundtracks, the Lumineers. Uh, it's quite a mix. I do. There's certain songs that do inspire certain things in me, and I like to re-listen to those songs sometimes when I'm working. When I worked in Skettrick Island over the summer in June, I actually was there for a week and I worked in complete silence. It just didn't feel right to put on sound. I was getting immersed in the space, my view out my window. I was getting back into my work after a long break. That was quite new to me, to work in silence, and I think it did work. I had no other distractions there at all. I was there by myself. I was working away, and I just didn't feel like I needed anything. Kind of shut myself off from the outside world for the time I was there, and it was brilliant. It was really, really, really worked, and I was able to get back on a path that I have wanted to get back onto for a long time. The best reaction I remember somebody had to my art had to have been at Art in Action down in Townley Hall in Drogheda. I used to participate in the event for a number of years as an exhibitor and a demonstrating artist. It was an incredible weekend. You were immersed in everything art. You got to meet so many artists, see how they worked, their process, and their work would be on display and for sale as well. It was a really, really enjoyable weekend. So at that weekend, one of the years I was exhibiting, I was sitting up at my desk and I was working away, and an elderly gentleman stepped up onto the platform where I was, and he was walking around looking at my work on the walls. I was working away. I kind of expected that he would just step down and walk away, which sometimes people do. They don't respond, or they don't know what to say. They can feel a little bit awkward when the artist is there and they're looking at your work. It can be a very humbling experience. I did learn a lot from those weekends, and I suppose got confident in terms of my own process and how I work. And the other artists at those weekends were always extremely supportive. But this gentleman had stepped up, and I really didn't know what he was going to say. So he was looking around, and then he came up to me and he spread his arms wide and he said, "I absolutely adore your work." And it just put the biggest smile on my face. It absolutely made my day. It was completely unexpected. So that was a lovely surprise. He did buy a piece as well, so it wasn't just something he was saying. He actually genuinely meant it, and it was very flattering, and it was lovely. It was a really, really gorgeous reaction to my work and completely unexpected. What do I hope people take from my work? I hope people take a little joy. I hope it brightens somebody's day and makes them look at the world a little differently. Maybe brings them back to their childhood, brings them back to that sense of wonder and excitement at our world and its beauty. That's, I suppose that's one of the main things I want people to take to my work. It's from my work. My work isn't, it's not deep, it's not tragic, it's not serious. It's meant to be fun. It comes from my heart and from my view of the world. And it's often seen, I suppose, as naive or childlike. I think children have such an amazing view of the world, and they see it as a bright place and full of hope and possibility. And I think that's what I want people to take from my work. I want them to just take away a little bit of hope, and yeah.